Good morning. My name is Tom Donnelly, and I am with the American Farm Bureau Federation. Just a little bit of background on me. I am the Director of Grassroots Program Development, which means I work on advocacy and grassroots issues with American Farm Bureau. We do a lot of trainings when states come in to DC, when they do their Hill visits, and I help with Cody and Randy on some of the campaign schools, but also manage a lot of our technology and digital resources for advocacy campaigns. Plus do some training like today on some best practices and things to think about when doing a farm tour or a Hill visit or an in-district visit like you would do in the state of Maryland, either up in Annapolis or back in a particular lawmaker's district office. So why are we here, right? We're here to get a couple of tips, couple of tricks on things to remember and how to engage, how to be an advocate for Farm Bureau, particularly now in this day and age. And I'm going to go over a couple of slides in a second where you'll see that it's really going to make an impact when you get involved, right? When you get involved, when you get engaged, when you become a resource to a lawmaker, because they're curious. Lawmakers are also there. They get elected to represent their constituents. If their constituents include farmers and ranchers, they want to know what's important to farmers and ranchers. So, we're here today to get a couple of those items to think about that might lead you to attend a town hall, that might lead you to call up a lawmaker's office and said, hey, I'd really like to talk to you about a particular issue and schedule that meeting. So hopefully in the next couple of minutes, we'll go over some things. Please feel free to ask questions on the fly so we can, have a dialogue as we move forward. But I'm going to go over a quick agenda. A couple of slides to set the stage for why it's important for Farm Bureau to get involved. What's going on? What is advocacy? Why is it important? How to become that resource, building that relationship. I touch on the Congressional Calendar, and that's important because from a federal standpoint, you'd be amazed how many days out of a year lawmakers are in their district. So it's an opportune time to call that district office and either schedule, a meeting to go in and meet with them or invite them out to your operation. A couple of slides here on, again, like I touched on, why it's important. Over the years, we've seen a shift from rural to urban, all right? And this says 2010, but the 2020 census that was just complete, we're getting some of those numbers, but it's not going to be that different than what you see here. Maybe a couple of points higher, in the urban, maybe a couple of points lower in the rural numbers, but it's going to be about the same. That's important when you couple with the fact that from a congressional standpoint, now this is from a federal standpoint, members of Congress in the House of Representatives, the number or the average of the population that is in their district, and we're going through redistricting right now, the average is 710,000. So that, they need to listen to a lot of constituents, a lot of advocates, and a lot of folks, across the hall, they're talking about animal activists, right? They're also constituents, so they need to listen to them as well. So with that, right, it's important to think about this quote from Thomas Jefferson back in 1803. We in America do not have government by the majority, but government by the majority that participate. All right, and that's important, right? Right now, you're here at Maryland Farm Bureau annual meeting. You're participating. And, if you continue to participate and engage, both from an advocacy standpoint and just a participation standpoint, either with the media or others, hopefully that's going to be louder than, the animal activists that they're talking about across the hall. So it's important, when you take into consideration the urban and, the where the people are living and how many constituents reside in a congressional district, it's time for government by the majority that participate. So right now, we're going through, policy development process, right? It starts at the county level and goes to the state. Next week we'll be in Arlington to sort of go through some of that process that then goes to annual convention in Atlanta. The reason this is important is because this is one of the only Farm Bureau is one of the only pure grassroots organizations in the United States. The policies and the issues and the items that we advocate at the federal level, and Colby and John and Pat advocate for at the state level for you, all come up from the county side, right? They're issues that are really impacting farmers and ranchers today. And so that makes the voice of agriculture really powerful from a lawmaker standpoint. And they know and they understand them when they hear from Farm Bureau, they hear really those issues and those items that impact all the way down to the county level. So we're going through this process now. And at the end of January, we will have sort of our marching orders for 2022. And we do this every year. We revisit, in case items like WOTUS stepped up or something else that comes up that we need to learn about, advocate about, engage about, et cetera. And it comes from the county level up. So why is advocacy important? It's important because what we advocate for helps agriculture, and it helps your farm, your ranch. It helps you to continue to do business. And so a couple of wins that we've had here in 2021 are on taxes and currently on waters of the US, on WOTUS. Now, recently there is another proposed rule at the federal level that's going to take WOTUS back to Obama level or Obama level definition. But as an organization, we are working with, advocates just like you and others and some of our coalition partners to make sure that our voice and agriculture's voice is going to be heard through the next rulemaking process. And as it goes through both the EPA and Corps of Engineers, et cetera. So, we've already heard from a lot of you, and you're probably going to get some emails in the not so distant future, either from myself or from folks like Colby to, fill out a form and send something into the Corps of Engineers or EPA. Now, we also had nearly 20,000 messages sent to members of Congress from about April, May, all the way through the end of this year on stepped up basis, because that's truly also important, right? So, a show of hands of how many folks have taken action through a website like Maryland or American Farm Bureau. Okay, that's awesome. So to get involved like that is fairly simple. For Maryland Farm Bureau, it's going to their website and looking for what is called the Action Center that Pat and Colby manage, and just filling out an email address that you want to be involved. And same with at the American Farm Bureau level, you can go to fbadvocacy.com and it'll take you to a page that's got all of our current national alerts. And you can scroll down to the bottom. It says sign up here. Click on that sign up button and fill in your information. So then you will receive, that next time that we send out an email that says tell EPA, you know, that we want waters of the US defined as X, okay? So I mentioned being a resource a little earlier. That's important because what you want to have happen is when an issue bubbles up from either the county level to the state lawmaker and they see something in the newspaper, or there's a bill introduced in Annapolis or at the federal level that mentions farming, ranching, or something that might impact agriculture, you want someone in that office to be able to reach out to you as a resource. So right here, this is some data from what is called the Congressional Management Foundation. It's a foundation in Washington, D.C. that does a lot of study, right, and essays into how Congress thinks, you know, what makes them, you know, act upon, how is the best way to communicate to Congress, et cetera. So you'll see what they've said. This is a survey that they conducted amongst federal staff, is meetings between staff and constituents, communications from reps of district, attending events. In your opinion, how important is these issues from understanding a constituent's views? And you'll see, again, they're in Washington, D.C., they're in Annapolis to represent you, because you know, whether or not you voted for a particular lawmaker or not, they are there to do the people's work, right? So being an effective advocate and communicating with them and engaging with them is they understand that that's part of their role and part of their job, particularly staff, right? Whether or not it's a legislative assistant or a district rep, you know, reaching out to them and being a resource with them is important, and they know, they expect it. So it's not like if you're calling in as a farmer or a rancher that they're not going to listen to you if you live in their district. That's what their role is to represent the constituents in their district. So a couple of slides here on things that we've heard, all right? And some of these I've heard just recently in a couple of conferences from actual chiefs of staff at the federal level. You know, when advocates are able to speak on issues and understand local impact quickly, they quickly become go-to resources, all right? So if you can establish that relationship with, you know, a staffer, and it does, sometimes you know a particular lawmaker, and that's fantastic, but sometimes you don't get the opportunity to have a personal relationship with the lawmaker, but the staff person is just as important, because the staff are the ones that are gaining all of that knowledge about a particular issue and then talking with their lawmaker about the issue and how to vote, all right? Be proactive is another thing that we've heard recently from chiefs of staff on the House side, all right? Don't wait. You know, so we're going through a redistricting, both at the federal level and at the state level. And I think in Maryland, you're going to lose a district, a district at the state house. So there's going to be people, whether or not it's you sitting in this room or not, there's going to be some Farm Bureau members, right, that all of a sudden have a new elected official, right? And so being proactive is maybe just setting up that opportunity to go in that meeting and say, hey, you know, my name's Tom. I have a farm, member of Maryland Farm Bureau, and these are some of the issues that are important to me. I just wanted to introduce myself, all right? And so instantly you're establishing that rapport and engaging with that new lawmaker, and you're being proactive. And lastly, again, I mentioned CMF, or the Congressional Management Foundation. 74% of staff on the Hill, this is in Washington, D.C., say personal relationships are the most effective way to reach influential lawmakers. Now that personal relationship starts with that call into the office to talk to the scheduler to set up a time, either on phone or on Zoom or in person, to introduce yourself. And so that introduction and that engagement and that sending of an article later, that you see in your local paper that you want to raise awareness to that staff person, that is creating that relationship, right? And if you have a good relationship with a staff person or a lawmaker, they are more likely to reach out to you when they have questions, right? And when they have questions, it's probably going to be around impact, right? How is this going to impact my operation, cost, statistics, things that you will know from your operation and from Maryland Farm Bureau that you can help them understand better about any sort of proposal that has bubbled up and been introduced or is being thought about from a draft proposal standpoint at the state level. So I mentioned earlier the Congressional Calendar. I've got 4 slides here. I'm not going to bore you with them, but if you think there's 365 days out of a calendar year, right? Members of Congress, and this is at the federal level. I know states different because they've got that shortened session where they have to get things done in the first couple of 2 to 3, 4 months of a year. But at the federal level, if you look at where they were in October, all right, you can't really see this on the screen, but down here is blue, votes postponed to the 28th from the 19th to the 28th. Above, that's 2 weeks, that's committee work. Since the pandemic, they've required or have allowed committees to do their work remotely. So they would have a Zoom committee hearing, they would have a Zoom committee markup to amend legislation. And all of the committee staff are also working remotely and working from home. So this is an opportunity, not just when they're on recess, because when they're on recess, they typically go back to the district. Committee work, they're also in the district, all right? And so going through, we've got October, we've got November, you see more time in the district, all right? We've got December, they're only gonna be in DC a couple of weeks, then they're gone. And then we'll look lastly at January. Here's January. Out of the 4 weeks, they're only gonna be in DC 2 weeks. So it's an opportunity to reach out to the scheduler into the district office that's closest to you and schedule a meeting, all right? So what are some of those meeting opportunities? Congressional Management Foundation also has done some of this analysis where they asked, how often does your member participate in some of these activities? Well, you don't see never, right? It's either weekly, monthly, or quarterly. Scheduled office appointments, community events, and site visits, all right? So members are out there, and you saw the calendar before where at the federal level, they're really not in DC doing the people's work. They're at their district office doing the people's work. There's that opportunity to reach out, to call them, to schedule that visit, to schedule the site visit, right? To attend a town hall, right? Because they're going to have more town halls if they're back in their district more often. Just a slide here on, at the federal level, the Maryland congressional districts. So you can see where we are here in Cambridge. That's all one particular district. And of course, as it gets closer to Washington, DC, some of those districts are smaller and smaller because the slide I showed earlier, about 710,000 constituents per district. And that's why we're redistricting, right? Because, the population shifts around. I think New York State for the first time has lost a federal House of Representatives district because people are moving out of the state. California, I think, lost one as well. So how do you find who your representative is if you already don't know who they are, right? At the federal level, you can go to house.gov, representatives, type in your zip code, and it'll pull up your House of Representative. You can do the same at senate.gov, but the senator, of course, represents the whole state, and all you would have to do is go to the Senate and click on the state that in the dropdown. At the Maryland side, it's going to MG, Maryland, legislation, maryland.gov. Again, plugging in your zip code, finding who that person is. They will either have a telephone number right there or a link to their particular office. And so you just click on that link. It goes to that particular lawmaker's website, and the information to contact them either by phone or via a web form will be there available. So in district meetings, again, we talked about this, constituents, right? Make the best advocates and the best folks for Farm Bureau to go in and represent ag issues, right? Members of Congress and lawmakers at the state level are there to represent their constituents. And if their constituents have farmers and ranchers, then they will listen to you. Then constituents know the district, right? Constituents like yourself can tell those stories about how a particular proposal would impact your operation. And they want to hear about, those stories. They want, it's one thing for Colby or Pat or myself or folks at AFBF to go and go to a meeting and say, do this for Farm Bureau. It's another for an actual constituent to come into the office and say, I think this particular proposal has not been thought through fully, because if implemented, it would impact my operation in this way. All right. They need to hear that. And again, it comes back to, the majority of those that participate, all right, make an impact. So to do an in-district meeting, call the scheduler, all right? Sometimes they have, a staffer that is dedicated to agriculture. Sometimes they do not. And so sometimes you'll get to meet with the lawmaker, other times you'll get to meet with the legislative staffer that represents that issue, or at the state level, the district representative, right? It's kind of a chief of staff. It's kind of the person that heads the office, but they also do legislative work. Again, it's going to depend on the member. It's going to depend on the office, but just reach out and ask for the scheduler, the first person that picks up the phone to make that appointment. We say no surprises. It's not, what we mean by no surprises is call to make an appointment and say, my name's Tom. I've got a ranch. I'd like to come in to talk to you about how WOTUS impacts me and my ranch, and then bring 20 people to the meeting. So no surprises, don't bring the media, don't bring a camera, but, make the appointment, let them know who's coming, and be prepared. Know your issue, come in. If you need additional materials, reach out to Maryland Farm Bureau and go to the American Farm Bureau website. We've got policy links on many of the issues that we're working on that will be, debated and approved here and then next week, and also in Atlanta in January. When you're there, make sure you have a card. If you don't have a card, ask for theirs. Give them your telephone number, take their telephone number. And that's important to really start that engagement with the staff of that lawmaker. Be on time. All right. This is both important in district, but it's also important back in Maryland, in Annapolis, or even Washington, DC. You'd be surprised, but on a given day, on a legislative day, staff have about 8 to 10 meetings with constituents. And so these meetings can last 15 minutes, they can last 30 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes. So being on time allows them to continue through their day and allows you to not be, pressed for time to try to get your point across in compressed, maybe you had a 30-minute meeting that was all of a sudden going to turn into a 15-minute meeting because you were running a little late. We all know that things happen, but it's best to try to be on time because because sometimes, if they have a meeting that runs a little late first thing in the morning, it might snowball a little bit. So be on time, be respectful of their time. Remember, like I mentioned, you are the constituent. You're one of those 710,000 people that live in the district, and tell your story. Be prepared to tell how something is going to impact your operation for a particular proposal. Be concise, provide background, pros, cons, and make it personal. When we talk about background, what staff love to know is statistics. What are the number of X that would be impacted by Y? How, even if it's a dollar figure, well, this is going to impact, all ranchers in the state of Maryland by, X million, X billion. Going and being able to provide that background of that particular issue, and then have, pros and cons, and then have some numbers to back it up, helps them. They'll take the data, they'll file it away, they'll keep it on their desk, and likely reach back out to you when they have questions. So this, don't forget to make the ask, is basically, if you're going for an introductory meeting, the introductory meeting is the ask, right? It's a new lawmaker and you're going in, and basically the ask is, anytime there's an agricultural issue that comes up, please reach out to me. And either I will help you, with some answers, or I'll find the right people, all right? Or the ask is, we don't like HR 1. Here's why. Please vote against it. Or the ask is, particularly at the state level, we know that AB 2 or AB 22 is going to be coming up in your committee next week. We would like you to support that and vote it out of committee. All right, so that's the ask. But you've already given them the background, you've already given them the pros and cons, you've told your story about the impact and how it would either help you or hurt you, and then you've made the ask. And don't forget the follow-up, right? Business card, telephone number, email. One of the things you can, and I think I have a slide on this, one of the things that you can always ask, if it's a member or if it's a staff person, is what is the best way for me to communicate with you? Is it a telephone call? Is it an email? Is it a text? What's the best way? How can we continue this dialogue and engage? And so here's some of the things this is a slide that I like to use when Farm Bureau comes to Washington, DC. And these are things to ask during a visit. And I'm going to ask the audience here if there's anything on this screen, on this slide, that sticks out to you. How can we help? Right? Now, how are you doing is a question that we've heard, we've started to hear from chiefs of staff at the federal level because of what happened, during COVID, what's happened during January 6th. And there's a lot of staff that have felt, some personal attacks. So in a conference a couple of weeks ago, we had a chief of staff sit up at a table in front of us and said, look, staff have been through a lot at the federal level. And so ask them how they're doing. And so we recently had the Women's Leadership Communications Boot Camp was in Washington, D.C. And we had them ask staff during some virtual Zoom meetings that we scheduled. They all asked this question and they were all amazed at the answer. The staff were very appreciative of being asked how they're doing. And I'm sure that it would convey down to the state level as well, but ask them how they're doing and how you can help. Don't forget to how can we continue the conversation, right? And feel free to call me. Whenever you have a question on this issue, here's my mobile. Give me a call. So town halls. Town halls are when members of Congress or also state legislators hold, a public meeting, right? Either, at a community center, at a school, at a church sometimes, where they ask their constituents to come together and, they will ask questions and they will allow, folks to give them, where are you on this particular issue, to ask them questions. What we found recently is because of COVID, while some members are doing what is called a teletown hall, others are still doing town halls, but infrequently, and they're starting to get a little smaller, right? So if you go to a town hall with 2 or 3 Farm Bureau members, you'll likely be, the largest group there and be called on, and you can raise your hand, et cetera, and get engaged. Prepare for your town hall, just like you would prepare for an in-district meeting, right? Collect your stuff, get your pros and cons, get your statistics, talk about a particular issue, or be prepared for a particular issue on how it would impact your operation, all right? And then develop a list of questions that you want to ask. Staff are also typically at town hall meetings. And so if this is a district that's in a predominantly larger agricultural district, they will have somebody there that would be able to specifically deal with some ag questions. Get there early, be polite. We've heard stories of some town halls, particularly during, not in Maryland, but in some other states like Florida and Texas, where, there's been some lashing out because of, COVID and, mask mandates and stuff like that. So if you go to a town hall, be polite, be there, tell your story, right? When you're called upon, and have some backup material that you can leave either with the member, the lawmaker, and or the staff person. So the other thing, the last thing that we're going to touch on for today, right? We talked about in-district, we talked about town halls, and this is facility tours, right? One of the best ways to get or to have a lawmaker understand a particular impact that a proposal has is to take them to your farm or ranch and show them in person, right? This is especially, true in WOTUS, when you can go and show a particular, ditch with water in it and help them understand that, this is not a navigable water, right? We need to really think about the definition of what the water of the US is, right? Because this will have X impact on my operation, right? So according to the Congressional Management Foundation, 90% of House members value visits to local facilities, all right? So they're doing this, right? They're not only are they allowing constituents, and they want constituents to come into their particular office and talk to them and be engaged and be proactive, they like going out into the community, right? They want to go and visit, a farm, a ranch, an operation, whatever you have, and so that you can tell them how a particular, see, they can take a picture, you can take a picture with them, see how a particular proposal would impact them. So a couple of more statistics from the Congressional Management Foundation. And this is compared to regular, going to a website and filling out a form and sending a letter to the EPA or to a lawmaker is important, right? It's important for a number of reasons to get engaged that way from an advocacy standpoint. But lawmakers have already seen and already tell us that, a site visit, right? And understanding, meeting with them in the district and seeing them personally has a more impact than a regular letter. Now the letters help, right? They help Colby, and they help Pat, and they help John, right? Because if they go to see a particular lawmaker on a particular issue and the lawmaker says, well, I haven't heard from you guys, I haven't heard from Farm Bureau, that's where your letters help, right? Your letters help with WOTUS to the EPA. Your letters help to members of Congress in DC on stepped up basis. So they help, they provide cover, to our policy folks, both at the federal and the state level. But and facility tours and site visits have almost a double impact. When a lawmaker can go to your particular facility and you can point to a ditch, or you can point to, a grain, silo or elevator, and say, if you have this particular proposal, we need to move this, or we need to buy a new one, or whatever that impact is, that's when they can, really have that, wow factor is essentially what you're looking for. So a couple of slides on how to prepare for a site visit. Work with Marilyn, right? If you're going to do a site visit, it'd be great to have Colby or John or Pat there, or at least, one of their local representatives, and know about it and hopefully participate with you. All right. Invite the media, ? Maybe depends on the issue. I think if you work with Maryland Farm Bureau and ask them, might be an opportunity for a photo op, right? You've got a lawmaker coming out, and the media can easily get a picture of yourself, a lawmaker, and your operation. Begin to work about 2 months in advance. The reason that this is on here is because even though at the federal level, members are in the district more often than they are in DC, they still have a crowded schedule, right? We like to hope that Farm Bureau can get in there and have somebody come out, within a week or two to come visit, an operation, but it does take time and it does take planning. So if you begin, 2 months out, that should give you enough time to work around your schedule and also the lawmaker's schedule. Now, sometimes you could go to a town hall and have that interaction with a lawmaker, and they can say, I'd like to come out and see your site, and it happened the next week. So, that can happen. So be prepared, but also begin, if it's something new and something fresh that you want to work on and get somebody out to your facility, give it a 2-month window to work with. Provide several dates, and then start mapping out the tour, all right? If it's just one thing that you're going to show them, that's one thing. But if you need to go to the WOTUS ditch, and then you need to go to this other place on your farm, think about the timing that it would take to get from one viewpoint or one of those things that you want to show to the other and map it out. And that would also help with, allowing the lawmaker to know how long they're going to be there. Is this a 15-minute visit, or is this a 2-hour visit? So if you think about it and you map it out and provide them with that information, then, the actual tour will go off smoother. So conducting the tour, you can do, what we recommend is an introductory session, right? Particularly if the media are there, if they show up, if you've invited them, so they can do a quick photo op. Explain to them what the lawmaker and the staff, what they're going to see, right? And then, of course, rope off any hazardous areas, right? That's important. We don't need anybody going someplace and getting hurt. But also, because you've mapped it out and you've mapped out the time, keep track of that time, or have somebody on your team keep track of that time. So you can, there's going to be questions that come up. There's going to be questions that happen as you're walking along, but keep track of the time, make sure that you can end on time. So, because the lawmaker is going to get engaged and ask a lot of questions, but sometimes they have a finite amount of time to be at your facility. So if you can keep people moving, and then, you can come to that after session time with a little bit more Q&A. And then that part isn't rushed either. So after the tour, send a follow-up and a thank you. I have here follow up with the media with an asterisk. If they were there, absolutely. Send some pictures that you took, right? Or you had your team take to the media or the reporter that was there. If you did not have a reporter during this particular facility visit, feel free to write in to your local weekly. All right, send a picture of yourself with the lawmaker and your facility, and say, we had Representative so-and-so at our facility. We discussed X. It was great. All right, you'd be amazed. It'll be printed. It'll be put into the weekly, and lawmaker staff read those weeklies. We heard a couple of weeks ago from a chief of staff that all of his district staff people read the weeklies for a variety of reasons, but they do read them. And so if you didn't have a reporter or anybody during that tour, feel free to write that letter, send it into the media. And then send any press clippings with notes back to the staff. Like if the staff are busy, and if they're in, DC, if you had some folks from DC come out, you're going to be the ones that see the local clippings. So feel free, clip them, email them, take a Xerox copy, mail them in, get them back into that staffer. It does a variety of things. It shows them that you're still engaged, you're being proactive, but it also provides them with something that they can show their boss, the lawmaker, that, this is still, it's an issue, it's important to Farm Bureau, and you're engaged with that particular staff person. And again, be proactive. So being proactive, right, is basically having that regular engagement with staff before there is a fire, right? So if you see another article that's similar or on another issue that's important to you, and you've already established that relationship with the staff person or the lawmaker, print it off, email it to them, or email them the link. Say, this is a great article because it goes over exactly what we were talking about in our meeting, at our facility tour, at the town hall, right? And continue that dialogue. And then what you'll see is engagement by the lawmaker back, engagement by staff back to you, et cetera. And so that's the power of Farm Bureau, is the ability to have that relationship with, staff and lawmakers, because we know that there's going to be a county commissioner that eventually runs for a state, delegate slot, that eventually runs for a state Senate slot, that eventually runs for Congress. So that relationship that you start at the county level or the state level with lawmakers and staff, because staff will move with lawmakers, and staff also sometimes decide to run for office. So it's a relationship game. And like I said, it's majority by or by the majority that participate is how a lot of advocacy runs these days. So where can I find information about my Lawmaker? I had a couple of websites up earlier about how to find your particular member with your zip code. But here, a couple of other websites. JustFacts.VoteSmart will have a lot of votes. This is particularly for federal members, but it'll have their voting record, and you can segment it by agriculture, and you can see, at the federal level, how they have voted and what they have voted on that would impact agriculture. Sometimes it's important to know that before you go into a meeting. You can go also directly to their website. That's important to find out the link to the website, number one, so you can have a telephone number or email call to schedule your, in-person meeting. But also they always have a sign up for my newsletter here. And when you sign up for your newsletter or for their newsletter, that's where you'll get the notice of an upcoming town hall meeting, right? You'll get a notice of, a lot of members. We just had the votes on Build Back Better. I would bet you 95%, if not higher, had an email newsletter that went out that mentioned Build Back Better and why they voted a particular way. All right. So signing up for their newsletter allows you to know when the town hall is scheduled, but also where they're thinking on particular issues. So it gives you a little bit more insight before you meet with them and or before you attend a town hall. And then Open Secrets is another website that allows you to dig in a little bit deeper about that particular member and who's giving to them, right? That's what they call it, Open Secrets. It's who's giving money, what PAC, what individual are giving, or individuals and companies are giving money to that particular member. Just a couple of additional websites to go to get information so that you could feel comfortable reaching out, calling, having that meeting, having that site tour, etc. So a follow-up. We talked about these, right? Send a personal thank you, send an email, right? Sign up to receive their newsletters, send a letter to the local paper, particularly if you had a site visit and you have some pictures. Post a thank you on your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Here's a little story. We had, I think it was New Mexico. We had a group from New Mexico into Washington, D.C. a couple of months ago. And they went and had a meeting on the Hill with their legislator, or one of them, because it was a large delegation. And one of the gentlemen that was with the New Mexico group took a selfie with the legislator, and he posted it on the legislator's Facebook page. By the time he got out of the cab or an Uber, I don't know exactly what they took, back to the AFBF offices, the legislator tagged it, liked it, and said, thank you for coming in. So there is interaction on social media. So if you have the accounts, feel free, post that picture from the site tour, tag them, right? Town hall meetings, right? Follow up, attend them, right? Most of the time, I shouldn't say most of the time, sometimes when they have a town hall meeting, they will actually, have an issue. They might say this is Medicaid, Medicare town hall, but you still will have some opportunity at the end of that town hall to ask a question, all right? Because they won't necessarily fill up that block of an hour or 2 hours, depending upon the number of constituents that attend. And again, I say this over and over. And once you've had that meeting, once you know that it's Mark or it's Amy or whoever that staff person is that you're working with for a lawmaker, proactive, right? It doesn't have to be an article on WOTUS. It could be, there's a session across the hall on animal rights. It could be an animal rights article that you have an opinion on and you would like to share that with them, and then continue that dialogue. Because, we want to make sure that Farm Bureau has a presence, is engaged, is communicating, and is thought of as a resource when issues come up before lawmakers. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions. Yes.
Specifically talk about kind of promoting that relationship on social media and selfie or whatever. Do you think it's a slippery slope on, if you're a direct-to-consumer business of, you have a lot of your customer base is pretty diverse there, and it might be important for our agenda to be whining and dining, to have that agenda and you want to promote it, but to then put it out there publicly.
Yes,
a distraction and a division.
it can, right? And then you need to think about if that's important to you to have that engagement on social media, and then which channel, right? Is it Twitter, right? Is it Instagram? Instagram's easier for the imagery, right? And you will likely get less commentary on an Instagram post than you would on a Twitter post, right? Facebook, you can pretty much lock down, who's coming to your page. We've got a whole social media thing that we can discuss, and our comms team has a lot of resources, but it's that when you're direct to consumer, sometimes you need to have that engagement, right? The answering of the questions in a Facebook post, but you also need to think about, is it important to have the fact that that particular lawmaker came to my facility? And again, unfortunately, we live in very partisan times. And so you will have, depending on which social media, platform you choose to post that picture or that post, you'll have people that, don't like it. But it's making that decision yourself about how much you want to, have that discussion, or even if you're going to engage with that discussion when people do make a comment or not. So I found that it depends on the platform. I know Twitter is a lot easier for people to hide behind, their persona and make comments. Instagram, not so much. So it depends on which ones you're using, what your engagement rates are, the number of people that are following you. But it still is, it's advocacy and it's engagement. So it's one of the things that we like to see, but you need to make sure that for your purposes that you choose the right avenue.
Misinterpreted your question. I don't think you're scared of what people might say on your social media, but more as losing the customers that are not happy with the visit, correct?
Yes.
So you're potentially losing that business, that rather.
Mixing politics, mixing religion,
Yeah.
have a business. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah. Liberal, conservative, the whole 9 years. But I think that would help is the way you caption that picture. Yes, these people don't like how liberal the senator is, but when you caption that picture, you feel like they came to learn our ways, to understand, and I feel like they, as a conservative, I'll be like, that's great, and maybe they not completely sway because that's even possible, but educate them. And then maybe that would make us think that they're thinking harder before they make their votes. Or
Absolutely, right.
So I think the caption is where you need to be.
Right, and you can also work with, excuse me, that particular lawmaker's team, right, and their social media comms team, right. It could be something that they post on their Twitter feed that they were at your facility and had a great time. That's not necessarily you advocating for that particular lawmaker. Yes.
You can also be more specific when you make the discussing this specific issues, not the whole, this whole agenda.
Right. I mean, I bringing WOTUS. Exactly.
Your takeaway is be very careful with
Yeah.
how you word things.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
That's where you got.
Yep.
Sometimes I feel like it would almost work in your favor because I think most of us are conservative in the business sense as a business owner. But all my customers are like raging liberals. So if I have a liberal person come to the farm and I post it, oh my goodness, we love them. Might not be what I agree with, but they might like that.
Well, and again, to all the points about social media, right? You know, we've had social media around long enough now to know the pitfalls and you know, how to craft the language. And sometimes you might not want to post something, right? You know, yeah. Any other questions or discussion? Great. Well, thank you. I have cards here for anybody that wants to grab a card. Please feel free to visit fbadvocacy.com, sign up for our alerts if you don't get our alerts yet. And, you know, thank you for coming.